Hi golfers, Nick here from Golf Tech Singapore. It's Friday, so welcome to another lesson on golf tips. This week on Golf Tips, I'm going to answer one of my subscribers' questions talking about the release of the golf club. So this question was from James. I've had a problem with how the club is released from last parallel to impact. Is there any way you can do a super detailed video on this topic? I can't seem to understand it, and every coach has a different theory. He talks about how he goes on to doing sort of half swings and how he gets quite steep. So we're going to talk about a couple of things today. We're going to talk mainly about the club face relationship and what we should be looking for in the golf swing once we get down to the last parallel position, which we call position 6. On the board here we have the grid. You've seen this before, we have the T claws set up in the base. So the outside one represents club path, the inside one represents the hand path. This black line here is the target line. These are the feet. So the ball position, this is for a right-handed golfer hitting this way. The ball position's just behind the left shoulder around here. This is where the draw is built in. If we swing along this line, we should catch the ball before the tangent point and swing to the left. So at this point here, it's very important, obviously, where the club face would be. Along this line is kind of roughly the club path. This would be more like an arc, but just to give you guys a little bit of an idea. If we were to keep the club face square to it, the club face would work along this line pretty much square to this, and the same in the follow through. So when we look at the club face at certain points, we're going to go into a bit of detail in a second when we go onto the mat here. We're going to be looking at certain positions for the face to be in, and we're going to talk about how the wrist can affect that as well. So I'm going to try and in a second hit some shots, but the first one would be like a green one, which face should stay pretty much square to this. This would be kind of a square path, but at this point the draw will be built in because I'm catching the ball before the center point, which means projects my path out to the right. In an ideal world, the face would be slightly open to the target line and close to the path, but for the argument's sake, we're going to try and put this square to this line. This would be kind of square to path with the straightest shots. We're also going to hit a shot with the club face closed, so we'll be looking at what this will look like at position 6, last parallel, and the face would be effectively, instead of where they're square to this line, they're going to be closed. So we would expect this ball to start left, go a bit lower, and curve left. Then finally, we can hit a shot, and again we'll look at what the face looks like at shaft parallel. We're going to hit one where the face effectively is red, which is basically open to these lines. So we would expect this ball to start to the right, go a bit higher, and then curve to the right. So effectively we're going to hit 3 shots. Green will be square, or what we're kind of looking for, and kind of what the average tour player does. Blue would be more of a closed face, so it expects more of a pull hooked. And then the red one would be an open club face, which you'd expect more of a push slice. So really this video is basically just to explain how position 6 is so critical in the swing and how that can affect the impact position. There's a lot more variables that can affect impact, but we're just going to try and keep it simple today. Just use the grid, use the club face position to explain what sort of ball flight we would expect at impact. So we discussed there the grid and how important it is to keep that club face square to the swing path. So for this next bit, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit 3 shots. One where I try and keep the face square to the swing path, one where I keep it closed to the path, and one when I open it to the path. We're going to look at the different sort of wrist angles, the different path, different club face relationships to that, and how the club sort of releases from the shaft parallel to shaft follow through. I'm going to do this sort of half swings, if you like, just to give you guys a little bit of detail to the swing, so you can follow me on the video as you watch these shots. So the first one will be the square swing. So I'm going to try and keep the face as square as possible to these grid lines, so you can see the video here. So this will look like on the backswing, somewhere around there. If you look at where my face angle is from this camera, you'll see how the club face is slightly toe down. This would be open, so anything around toe up or vertical to the ground would be open. Anything more sort of horizontal would be more closed. So we're going to see how this sort of wrist position affects that. So I'm going to hit 3 shots. First one will be square. We're going to look at the ball flight and the data afterwards. Second will be closed, the third one will be open. So the first one's going to be sort of my square swing, just a little swing. Saw the ball, slight little draw on it, went pretty straight. So you saw the first shot there, slight push draw with a sort of square face. Now going into the grid, we talk about how having the ball position behind this left shoulder, which is the centre point of the swing, should produce a slightly inward out of attack. Now when I swing this second one here, we'll keep the face closed. I'm actually going to change my wrist position here. And now when I change this wrist position, it can also take the club head a little bit more inward. So I may expect a bit more of an inside path here, but we'll see. So I'm going to try and keep this face closed from here and then deliver through and see what happens to the ball flight and the club face angle when we look at the data. So again, you see that ball go a little bit more to the left and a little bit lower. Okay, so the third shot now, the final shot, is going to be sort of the opposite to the last one. So this time I'm going to try and open the face, have a different wrist position and just deliver that club face through. See what happens to the ball flight, see what happens to the club data with the club face. Same sort of length swing, same sort of speed, but just with the face more open at this point. So definitely higher, definitely more out to the right. Let's sit down now, take a look at those swings in a bit of detail and look at the club data. Okay, so you see me hit the 3 shots there on the quad. You saw the different ball flights. So up on the screen here, it's going to bring up some data. So first of all, you can see the ball flight. So you can see the red one went the highest, the green was the middle one, and the blue was the lowest. If you look at the top view, you can see the blue went to the left, green went pretty straight, and the red went to the right. Looking at some of the data, so I tried to swing that as similar as possible in terms of the club path and the angle of attack. When you actually look at the club data, speed was slightly faster with open for whatever reason. You'll see how the efficiency was the lowest for open. So when the club face is more open, it produces more loft and the ball goes higher, it comes off the face a little bit softer. So despite having the fastest club speed, it still went the shortest distance. Angle attack was very similar, like I said, tried swinging as similar as possible. Looking at the club path, I tried to do my sort of normal club path, which I'd expect to be 4 or 5 degrees from in to out. With the closed one, because of the way the wrist works, we're going to look at the video in a second, it just produced a little bit more of an inside club path. The other two kind of similar, a little bit more inside with the square one compared to the open. In terms of the face to path, this is the interesting one. So with square, my club face was 3.5 degrees closed to the path, but slightly open to the target line. With the closed swing, I was 23 degrees closed to the path, which means it was close to the target line as well, which is why the ball started left and curved left. With open, I was 13.5 degrees open to the swing path. So even though I swung from the inside, the ball started right of the line and curved further right. Moving on, looking at the launch angle, as expected, square was 21.6 degrees launch, close was lower, 16.8, and open was higher, 31.1. So you could definitely see the difference in the ball flight there. What we're going to do now is take a look at the swing in a bit of detail. We talked a little bit earlier about the grid, how that controls the club path into the ball. We've talked about how the club face is important in relationship to the club path. We're going to take a look at the swing in a bit of detail just to show you guys the difference. Just before we take a look at the video here, I just want to explain to you that going back to the question from James earlier about sort of the release of the golf club, I think in my experience the position at 6 when the shaft's parallel is such a key indicator of what the club path's going to be and roughly what the club face is going to be. Now there are many ways you can manipulate this, but I tried to swing that as naturally as possible down into the ball with each of those swings. So with the square one, you saw the ball went pretty straight. When I closed the face, it started left and curved left, and with the open it pushed right and curved right. Let's take a look at those swings in a little bit of detail and just to show you guys the difference. So on the left here I've got square, on the right I've got the closed one. Just notice at setup here, the handle's a little bit higher for close, so it just helps me sort of flex my lead wrist. Just having the handle high, you'll see in a second with the open one, it's a little bit lower, the handle. So standard would be the one on the left, but if you're going to take it back to sort of the shaft parallel on the downswing. So what you'll notice here with the closed one, the face here is more degrees closed at this point, so you can see how the toes pointing more downwards. With green, you can see how it's slightly toe down, but maybe not as much as exaggerated as it is with the blue one there. So the main difference really would be with blue and the closed one, this left wrist is more flexed at this point. This just closes the face, but also you'll notice how the club is slightly more inside. So this one delivered more of an inside path. I think this was around 10 degrees into out. This one on the left was around 5. I tried to swing them as similar as possible, but changing the face angle by just bowing my wrist. I've talked about this a little bit before, but basically the flatter you keep the wrist, generally the more square the face is going to be, the more you flex it this way, the more closed. and the more you extend it this way, the more the face can be open. We'll look at the open one in a second. So I tried to sort of deliver that club very similar into the ball, same speed, same sort of angle of attack, just from these different positions. So we're going to take these swings down just into sharp parallel and follow through, which is position 8. We talked a little bit earlier about the grid lines on the board, but I'm just going to try and stop it here at sharp parallel, just to show you guys. So on the left, you can see the face angle there for green. So that would be pretty standard, if you like, square to path. This one here you would say is a little bit open for blue. Now it's interesting, that ball went the most to the left. I was trying to keep the wrist sort of flexed as I went through. I just closed the face a little bit, but you can see how when a lot of people talk about the release of the club, they think that by rolling the hands it's releasing the club to draw the ball. You saw the one on the right, they actually went lower and further to the left. It was more about where I was at impact as opposed to where it is at this point. But just to give you guys a little bit of an idea, if you look at green on the left there, if I put a line at P6 sharp parallel, you'll see the angle is very similar to P8, and that would be trying to keep that face pretty much square to the grid. So I'm going to leave green up on the left hand side, but I'm going to just change the closed one to open. As the shaft angles were different for square and closed, you can see it's lower for the open one, so I've got my wrist set at a different angle. It just felt like in that position it's easier to flex my lead wrist. So basically I'm starting with a different wrist bend at the start. You would say that I have more radial deviation for this open one and more ulnar deviation for closed. Now in the downswing, these are the two positions we're comparing. If you have a look at the red one where the face is more open compared to green, which is square, you can see the difference in the face angle here. Now when I extend this lead wrist, and we talked a little about this with the flexing with the closed. If you look at the left wrist for open, you'll see how it's more extended this way, or cupped if you like, and just see how that pops the club just slightly more outside. So you saw this club path was a little squarer into the ball. Let's have a look at the follow through position here. So you see the ball started off to the right for the open one. With the square it started just to the right, so it's a bit of a push draw. And then the club just disappears on the way through, so it's hard to see where that is roughly on the finish there, but I would say this club face is probably a very similar sort of release to where green is. So you can see for red it was open the most, and then it's probably closed the most, if you like, as I've gone through, yet the ball's gone out to the right. So there's a lot of misconceptions about trying to roll the face creates a draw. Okay, it doesn't necessarily happen like that. It's where the club is at impact. What I would say is this position is so critical to determine what happens at impact. If you look at the left hand one for square, I'd expect that club path to be just slightly from the inside. It does depend on ball position. We've talked a little bit about the grid, where the ball is positioned in relationship to the left shoulder. The more back it is, the more inside, the more forward it is, the more out to in. So the ball position can have a bearing, obviously where you're aiming can have a bearing, but generally if you look at the club position in line with the hand, you're going to generally just get slightly in to out club path. As soon as it gets outside, it's generally going to be moving closer to more out to in. And then obviously more inside of the hands, the more in to out. You saw that with the 3 different swings there. So I'll try to do that as similar as possible. Just wanted to highlight the point how important this position is. There's obviously a lot more factors involved, but I just wanted to just highlight this position and relationship between the club face and sort of kind of where it should, kind of what we're looking for. Green is square, we're kind of looking to stay close to that. So if you're videoing your swing, just check these angles. Just to look back one more time at green here and the square one, you'll see the sort of the club shaft angle, the swing plane as it's come down here. I'm sort of going through my forearm here, so the shaft you'd expect to be going through the forearm here. That would be sort of pretty much on plane position for a club that just comes slightly on the inside. So if you're going a bit steep, James, it could be that shaft could just be outside a little bit more potentially. So just check on that. But what you want to try and start off with is video your swing. Just start off with these little swings. Just try and match up the club face at P6 and then P8. So I hope that helps explain a little bit about P6, how important that is, where the club is, where the club face is. Now there is more detail to go with this. I've seen players still swing from out to in from that position at P6, depending on how they release the shaft. But if you can maintain a little bit of forward shaft lean, that would really help you sort of strike the ball and keep that club on plane, if you like, as you swing through. So important to try and keep that club square to the grid lines. You saw there wasn't much rolling of the face through there. In fact, the one that went the most to the left probably had the least roll through impact. It was more the fact that I hit the ball more from the inside with the face more closed to impact that made the ball curve. I think there's a few misconceptions about how to draw the golf ball, but any comments on that, post them in the box below. If you don't already, please follow me on my other social media platforms, and we'll see you again next week for another video on golf tips.